Hello and welcome to Farmland. On today's programme, I'll have a sit-down interview with Minister of State at the Department of Agriculture with responsibility for land use and biodiversity, Senator Pippa Hackett. Minister, thanks for joining us today. First, let me talk about the forestry licensing system in Ireland. There has been much criticism over the last couple of years in relation to it. And while strides have been made to improve the figures and the statistics and the applications granted, there's still a delay there with some private licensing. An Oireachtas colleague, independent TD Michael Fitzmaurice, even went so far as to ask you to consider your position given the whole debacle, I suppose. And how feasible is it that the big logjam, pardon the pun, will be, I suppose, eradicated maybe by the end of this year, and we'll be back on track with forestry licences and planting?
Well, I suppose it's important to remember that from 2019, due to court action, the forestry licensing output was severely hampered. And when I entered office then the following year in 2020, there was an incredible backlog in the system. And at that stage, there was an immediate need to deal with the backlog and the appeals, and we did that. I introduced legislation, emergency legislation at the time, and within a number of months that cleared that particular backlog. The court cases really made our department have to redesign the whole licensing system, and in a way we're still in that process. We've certainly increased the numbers of ecologists, by many tens, forestry inspectors, and so the resource implications were massive, so we've dealt with a lot of those as well. Besides that initial delay in the appeals, there was a really significant problem with the supply into the sawmill sector, which was threatening thousands of jobs. This is going back to the end of 2020. So that issue, I can happily say, is not an issue anymore. We don't have a threatened sawmill sector. We don't have a threatened supply into the timber sector. Look, we're still fixing the problems that have arisen in the past, and we're working really hard to do that. So we did increase our licenses output last year by about 56%, and we have made commitments as a department to double afforestation licenses for this year, and we're on track to do those things.
And are we on track? Because I know that the targets have been missed month on month for private licensing, and afforestation and planting has been significantly down in recent years.
Yeah, I suppose we don't do a month by month target. It is an overall annual target, and there are ebbs and flows in how licenses are issued. But we certainly will be working incredibly hard to deliver those targets, because ultimately we have to deliver the targets, not only for landowners and farmers in terms of receiving a licence. We also have the whole afforestation piece to deliver on in terms of climate action as well.
Can I move on then just in terms of the burning of green waste in general? An exemption, it's a story that we cover regularly on Agriland. And I suppose with the climate change coming in, obviously we have to make changes. There has been an exemption for a number of years. Do you think that there will be an opportunity to farmers to switch to alternative methods? At the moment, we're getting a lot of criticism from farmers who say that, well, we don't have any alternative. This is what we do. It's just, it's, I suppose, more organic waste that we're burning, like scrub and stuff. Would there be alternatives there available for farmers should they choose and move away from the burning of green waste?
I mean, I think there should be, and I think there are possibilities there, and we probably need to think a little bit more outside the box in terms of how we deal with that. And certainly I've tasked my department to come up with some options around that, because a pile of green waste in one person's eye might be just taking up space and needs to be removed straight away, and then maybe in another person's eye could be a habitat in itself. So I think we just need to maybe think more broadly about this. Obviously the legislation is there. There's a derogation for this year. It was extended, and it's something we're not going to be able to continue to do. So I would like to think that certainly my department would be able to come up with some options. And look, if anyone has options, it could be composting, it could be just maybe leaving it there as a habitat, and maybe there are supports around that. But I think there are ways and means of dealing with this, and I look forward to seeing some exciting ones.
In relation to the organic farming scheme, you're an organic farmer yourself, Minister. there probably isn't the uptake that maybe originally was envisaged for the organic farming scheme. Now, there has been a 20% increase, which is good to see, but still the numbers, I suppose, are still relatively small. What could be done to maybe convince more farmers to switch over to organic, or to convert, I suppose, some of their land to organic? Many farmers might feel that they just wouldn't make the same margins with it.
I think when you look at if you look back at organic farming in Ireland, we haven't really delivered very well on it. We've been on or off about 20 years, trying to build up the sector, and we're still at a very small percentage of land area, less than 2%. And, when I took office, maybe about 1,700 farmers. Now, since that, when I started, I said, look, we're going to have to start this straight away. I need the organic farming scheme opened. I pushed for that. I got that. And, in 2 years, we've taken in 700 farmers. So, it's, 700 as a standalone figure mightn't sound like a lot, but off a back of 1,600 is actually quite a significant improvement. We are, for the last 2 years, in a transitionary period. People are waiting for what's in the new CAP. I think there is a certain hesitancy there. But saying that, I think the more farmers we get in, the more conversations that happen, the more farm walks. I mean, I must commend my own department in Teagasc and the organic certification bodies for running a whole series of farm walks this last 8 or 9 months, and they're continuing throughout the summer. And that further engagement, that peer-to-peer, farmers talking to other farmers about it, I think we will absolutely see an increase in interest in it, and even in the current environment we're in all senses of the word, it's going to be an option for many more farmers. So I think we're making the moves to that. We're going to have a new scheme available to farmers at the end of, towards the end of this year, maybe around October time. I hope it opens. That will be the introduction to the new CAP scheme of it. So I think there's exciting times ahead. I think it's challenging, but I think farmers, when they embrace it, it makes them think about their farming in a different way. And so many farmers I've met, when they become organic, or it reignites their passion for farming.
And Minister, you mentioned there that there may be a scheme at the back end of the year as part of the new CAP. Recently, the issue of organic eggs, for example, and supports for organic egg farmers also kind of came up, where they were looking for support, and it was raised in the Oireachtas. Do you think that that's something the government might consider?
Well, I think the main issue is in terms of the cost of feed, because a lot of eggs nowadays are, in fact, a lot of them are actually free range as well. There has been that shift in egg production in particular, as the consumer has wanted. We don't want the images of hens crammed into cages and so forth, and organics has helped a little bit with that, and certainly free range. I think the input costs for poultry, and certainly organic pig producers, we don't have very many of them, but they are out there, is an issue, and I think it's something I'm keeping an eye on in terms of where if there are supports needed, we need to listen to those farmers.
In terms then of just switching, not specifically your focus, but obviously you're a member of the Green Party with the Department of Agriculture, in terms of solar supports for farming communities, farming agribusiness, what can be done in terms of really igniting, I suppose, that interest in solar and making it a viable renewable energy option for farming? Now, there's a lot of complaints that, TAMS doesn't go far enough, it's restricted, and farmers can't feed back to the grid. Should that not now be considered, given, I suppose, the times we're in, the rising cost of energy and so on?
I agree. I think the issue with the TAMS funded solar panels not being eligible, I think that's something we have to look at, and because that just doesn't make sense. Yeah. I mean, certainly, we have been making inroads as a government into opening up the whole solar panels on roofs element. We're shortly, I understand, to sort of clarify the legislation around planning permission for solar panels on roofs, and that has been an issue not just for farmers but for schools and communities and who have decent sized roof space, who could use it for solar panels but have been sort of restricted by the planning requirements. And certainly the feed-in tariffs, I think, would be something that should entice, again, everyone, and particularly farmers. The microgeneration support scheme, there's going to be other schemes for more small generation of energy. I think it's fair to say that there are farms around with solar panels. They've been using them really effectively for their own use. If you're a large dairy farmer, high energy use, or even pig and poultry units, again, it really delivers for them. And I think in this where we are now with the input costs and the rising costs of energy, I think those farmers are certainly reaping the benefits of that. But I think in the future, yeah, it would be great to see, certainly roofs in potential covered with solar panels and supporting the farmers for their own use, and then the excess fed back to the grid.
Of course, the Department of the Environment confirmed, I think it was just in the last week, that they confirmed that the supports and the grants for small-scale solar will be phased out, I think from 2024 onwards. So will something else be introduced then, or will it just be sort of abandoned?
I think while we're in this, I suppose, race to decarbonise our energy sector in particular, I think we have to look at all options here. And if the figures add up for solar panels on farms, I think it's something we'll still have to look at. If we can encourage farmers to embrace solar panels, not only for their own use but for the grid, then I don't think we'll be not looking at that. Yeah.
And Minister, biodiversity is another part of your portfolio. It's something that's become increasingly important in recent years as we try to tackle climate change, and we see the value of biodiversity in our countryside. Many farmers have embraced it. A lot of biodiversity in Ireland at the moment seems to be in areas that are designated, like SPCs and Natura 2000 areas. And farmers in these areas, particularly hill farmers, are saying it's a little more difficult for them to farm in these particular areas. They don't get the benefit that other farms would in different parts of the country. And the land value is also decreased somewhat because of the designations on it. Is there an opportunity for the government to consider some sort of support for these particular kind of farmers on hills areas or designated areas?
I think in a way we are putting those supports in place. I mean, if you look at the proposals around the new AECM in the next CAP, where we have the cooperation project areas, and a lot of upland farmers might well find themselves in one of these areas that gets the extra support, because we're recognising not only, I suppose, the high value, nature value of their land, but also that if we can support them to manage it in the way that delivers best for biodiversity, because we do have incidents of, in some upland areas, of overgrazing where the management practices aren't appropriate. So if we can reward farmers to put in to adopt the correct management practices, then there's funding opportunities there. I mean, even in terms of the changes we made to the organic farming scheme, I know it's not specifically a biodiversity scheme, but I mean, we reduced the minimum stocking rate for organic farming from this year. So you don't need to have the old one was 0.5 a hectare, livestock unit per hectare. Now it's down to the same as the ANC, 0.15. That has opened the door, I think, for hill farmers to become organic, and a lot of them may not have to do an awful lot. They'll have to do some changes, but it mightn't be such a big effort for them to become organic. And I think that's something that I think some hill farmers could look into as well. But certainly I think there are lowland areas as well that we need to be supporting farmers to protect the biodiversity. But I think there are opportunities there for upland farmers, yeah.
Minister, you're a member of the Green Party and obviously one of the coalition partners. I think somewhat between the farming community and the Green Party, there seems to be a disconnect at times where, vice versa, the Green Party maybe don't get rural farmers as well as rural farmers don't get the Green Party. And it can sometimes cause discord. Now, many farmers obviously appreciate the environment and they understand, I mean, they're farmers, they're of the land, they want to protect it as much as anyone else. Is there any way that we could I suppose, see a way of finding that disconnect and, adjusting it slightly? Is there a way that we could change perspectives on both sides?
I think, well, if I look back to even our last party convention, it was all online because it was during COVID times, but we had a session on agriculture. We invited farmers in to speak, so they could get their side of the story, and there was a feed, an over and back in terms of Q&A. I think the fact that I'm a farmer myself, I would like to think it would help to break down some of those barriers. And indeed, we have quite a few farmer members of the Green Party, which people find quite surprising, but we do. And they're probably farmers doing it in different ways and trying things that maybe haven't always been available for farmers to try. Like we have a couple of farmers who have been doing multi-species swards, for example. example, for many years. And now, look, it's great to see my department leading out on that with supports for that type of measure. You know, farmers who've been doing regenerative practices, biological practices, you know, which aren't recognised as a specific way to farm, but they see it works well for them, and they inform a lot of our members about farming practices that they feel works for them and works for nature, if you like. But I do think it is important to emphasise really that, you know, the Greens, you know, they do take a lot of flack, and they're pitched as being anti-rural and anti-farmer, and ultimately they're not really, because they absolutely have to be able to, where we need the action to deliver most of the green policies is in our rural areas, and we want to absolutely embrace the farming communities and the rural communities to enable us to do that. So it's not in our benefit to have this discourse, as you say, and I think maybe the longer we can deliver through the programme for government, through my work in the department, you know, I would like to think, you know, farmers will say, oh, well, yeah, maybe the Greens weren't so bad after all. You know, if we can flash forward maybe 5 or 10 years and see what we're putting in place now through our involvement in this coalition government, I think we will hopefully be in a better place, and farmers will look back saying, yeah, they weren't too bad.
And do you think that farmers will come along this journey in terms of trying to reach net zero maybe by 2050? Do you think that, from your experience, and as you said there, you know, the Green Party gets a lot of flack, and as a politician, no more than every other politician, I'm sure you get a lot of criticism as well. But do you see the tide of change? Do you see positive moves by farmers? Because sometimes they feel a little vilified, and I'm sure the ones who are doing an awful lot of work on tackling their environmental methodology and everything feel a little bit lost in the conversation. Absolutely,
and look, it's a sensitive issue, and I completely accept where farmers come from on that. I mean, I suppose I've spent my time as minister, well, when we could travel eventually, getting around to farmers on the ground, seeing what they do, listening to their stories, seeing how they moved from maybe one system to another, and the journey they went through. And it's those stories that all farmers need to hear, not just me. I think there's scope in that, and I think the more farmers I see changing how they do things, we're not asking anyone to stop being a farmer. We're not asking anyone to stop producing livestock. I mean, we need the livestock on the land, and I'm personally a great believer in that interaction. That is part of the ecology. Problem is, we haven't done it always very right. We haven't, but we're learning. There are some wonderful examples. You know, my department's learning from what works, particularly through those EIP style projects. You know, when you get farmers in areas, in catchments, in landscape level approach, working collectively, working together for a common good, it's so effective. Maybe we've isolated farmers a little bit with a sort of one-size-fits-all type of approach, and I think they're the learnings we are now bringing through to the next round of the CAP, and there will be learnings there we'll bring on to the next one. But ultimately, you know, we're only going in one direction here, and when you look at things like biodiversity and water quality, they're not nice to haves, they're must-haves. You know, and as a country, we're going to have to embrace that, and we are. I think we are embracing it. Maybe not as quickly as some would like, but you know, it's a step-by-step process. But people shouldn't feel or be vilified. And you know, if in doubt, you know, have a conversation with someone who's doing something different, and ask them how is it going? How are you managing without so much fertilizer? How are you know, managing your land without you know, at a lower stocking rate, or how, you know, just ask questions. And I think if we can facilitate those conversations, that would be useful.
And finally, Minister, I might ask you, because I asked your colleague, Minister Martin Hayden, as well, when he joined us on Farmland, about your portfolio and what you want to achieve during your term. They say a week is a long time in politics, but I suppose 3 years could be a lifetime. And I no doubt feel that you have your personal goals that you want to achieve as a Green Party member and as a Minister of State in the Department of Agriculture within that time. What would you like to see as the change that you instigated in government?
It's a good question, because when I think back to the Programme for Government Formation talks, and I led my own party's agriculture talks on that, and you know, it's all well and good throwing out, we want this and we want this and we want agreement on this, and before we knew it, we had a huge, massive document. But it's the delivery of that is important. So, I mean, for me, I suppose, obviously, if we can hit our targets in terms of organic farming and keep going, that's an important aspect. Not just so we did it, it's so we've actually created the environment that farmers have embraced a different way perhaps, and maybe not such a different way for many of them, but they've embraced it and they enjoy it. You know, ultimately we want happy farmers, you know, as well as a happy environment. That's crucial. Look, the forestry, I'd love to get that, you know, back on a track that's going to deliver, because we have the targets there are really, really substantial. You know, we are a long way off our annual committed targets. You know, even this year we will be again probably. So it's just about getting that on the right track and delivering. And again, it's about having happy farmers and happy landowners, that they don't feel this is a waste of time, I'm not engaging with that because of the problems. You know, let's get rid of the problems and then let's engage. And I think it would be lovely to see the development of that sort of EIP model through our new AECM. But you know, I don't know if you've seen there's like map of Ireland, and it has certain areas which are going to be where the cooperation measures. Eventually I'd love to see that all blurred out in different, you know, where we fill the gaps in and every farmer is working collectively with their neighbour or you know, in a catchment to deliver for that area. And I think when you get that collective working together, you find water quality improves, you find biodiversity improves, and you probably ultimately find that emissions go down.
Absolutely. Just before you go, as you mentioned that EIP model, anecdotally we're getting feedback back that that's a model that farmers like. Mm-hmm. It seems to work. It's proving very popular from ground up rather than top down, no disrespect, mm-hmm. but it seems to be something that catches on within particularly rural communities.
I think you're right, and I think it's that ground up level is because we involve the farmers from the start, and they actually, because they know their land, they know their areas, they collectively come up with the approaches, you know, with the guidance of maybe ecologists or scientists or water experts or hydrologists or whoever that may be. They ultimately agree and come up with the plan, and they have ownership on it, rather than being, you must do A, B and C, and then we might give you a few quid. You know, this is, they own it and they're passionate about it. And I think that has shone through all those EIPs, and certainly Ireland is recognised as a leader in Europe for our delivery. We're heralded all the time on it. So that's a good thing to pat ourselves and farmers on the back.
Fantastic. Minister Pippa Hackett, thank you very much for joining us on Farmland today.
Thank you.
That's all from this episode of Farmland. Thanks for tuning in. Stay up to date with the latest in agricultural news on agriland.ie, and be sure to check in with us on social media at the following links.